My name is Kate, and I'm the outreach representative with Help Hope Live. Help Hope Live is a national nonprofit that supports community-based fundraising for people with unmet medical expenses and related costs due to cell and organ transplants. And unfortunately, one of our panelists, Katrina, isn't able to join us today. She had something unexpected come up, but we're really hoping that she can answer some questions in the blog that we're going to be releasing after this discussion today. She is waiting for a kidney transplant, but our panelists that we do have with us are definitely going to speak on their experiences pre-transplant. So I'm going to pass it over to Pat, who will be our moderator today. He received his heart transplant in 2017. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, talk a little bit about his transplant journey, how he heard about Help Hope Live, and kind of where he is today. And then we'll go forward meeting our other panelists.
Thank you, Kate. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you all today about the stages of transplant as I experience them, and then as well as our other two panelists will give you their experience of that as well. My transplant was in 2017, like Kate said. It was at Cleveland Clinic, but the journey started long before then. And so, throughout the next hour, I and the other panelists will talk to you about, how it was to go through that process of waiting, how it was to go through the process of receiving the transplant, and then what it's been like since then. I first learned about Help Hope Live in 2015, which was I would say about 4 or 5 months after I was listed for transplant. And it was a godsend for me to learn about Help Hope Live from my transplant coordinator at the Cleveland Clinic, actually the social worker there, who was assigned to my case. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I need. And even at the time, I didn't realize exactly how much I was going to need it because of some of the unmet medical expenses that popped up along the way. So again, I'll tell you more about the process, but I'll leave it at that for now. And then I'm going to pass it over to Greg to give his introduction. Greg?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I began having symptoms of congestive heart failure as far back as 2007. I did have an ICD implant in 2009, and in the years since, the ICD did work to the extent that it could. However, in the summer of 2019, my condition had worsened, and I was soon listed for transplant. And I went through all of the pre-transplant procedures, the testing, the evaluations through the heart transplant clinic at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And it was at that time, really around November or so, that I found out about Help Hope Live. And it really was a very valuable service, remains so. I've had an incredible amount of support from so many people that I've known, family, folks at church, people in the community. It's just been it's been great, and they've been really super to work with. And it really has, the program, it really has helped defray expenses that has come up every now and then during the first year or so. I had my transplant on February 27th of 2020. I had been hospitalized at HUP 3 weeks prior, and it was only the installation of a balloon pump that kept me going up until the time that I received word that the donor heart had arrived. And I always like to tell folks that there is with that I always refer to the organ that was implanted as a donor heart. I never ever refer to it as a new heart. A new heart is the heart that you were born with. So I never refer to it in any other terms other than it's a donor heart. And that donor heart has certainly come through with flying colors. I've been able to make a pretty full recovery. I'm continuing to get better, and a lot of it has to do with getting in exercise every day, walking my dog, participating currently in a cardio rehab program through Lancaster General Hospital. So that has been very, very good for me. So that's basically a succinct synopsis of my situation. Now, I had spent 53 days from the time I was admitted to HUP through the time that I went through cardio rehab for 9 days at the Good Shepherd Clinic, which is associated with HUP. So I was basically there 43 days at HUP, another 9 days or so at Good Shepherd, and then was released and went home on March 27th of 2020.
All right, thanks, Greg. I like your distinction between donor heart and new heart. I like
the only other new heart I know, Pat, is a funny guy named Bob. That's the only other one I can.
Funny, my donor's name is Bob, and my fantasy baseball team's name is Bob Newhart.
There you go.
Anyway, so Linda, let's hear your introductory story, please.
Yes, my name is Linda Jarrah, and I had a heart transplant in September of 2016, September 22nd, 2016. I at Temple University Hospital in Philadelphia. That was my transplant center. I am now a patient at Jefferson Transplant Hospital. I followed my transplant doctor there, also in Philadelphia. I was diagnosed with heart failure on December 24th, 2014, was hospitalized January of 2015, listed for a heart in February, and had the LVAD put in March of 2015. My heart failure was idiopathic, and waited 18 months on the LVAD before the heart came in. And I had two calls prior to the one that's in two false alarms, so to speak. I heard about Help Hope Live through my social worker when I was inpatient, lying in a hospital bed, and I wasn't very happy when she did that. I was like, how am I supposed to fundraise? I'm like, I can't, every time I leave the hospital, I'm right back in. But it worked out, and it was great. It really helped out. And it's such a wonderful resource to use, because post-transplant and pre-transplant expenses add up very quickly.
All right, thank you, Linda. Yeah, I would tack on. You had a couple of what I was told were dry runs. You called them false alarms. I didn't have any of those. I just waited a lot longer. But when I got the call, it was the call. So, you know, I was kind of appreciative of that, because, you know, I can't imagine that getting your hopes up and getting to the hospital and being like ready to go. You got all the tubes stuck in you, and the, you know, IVs and everything, and all of a sudden, nope, sorry, got to go back home.
Yep.
That's tough.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
All right. Let's move on to our next topic. This is kind of more about support, and, you know, obviously as transplant patients, we all had to, you know, I think it's probably fair to say that none of us would have made it through without the support of those around us. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, there's a lot that goes in preparing for going through the actual process and then recovering from the process. So what part did support play? And maybe I'll start with you this time, Linda. Maybe you go first.
Support through the process is very important. There's a lot of unknowns that I had as a patient of what life would look like with an LVAD and a heart transplant. And it was a scary process. And just to have support from family and friends was great. And those same people are the ones that helped me today with planning benefits and everything that I need to do to help me raise money. But without that support, without people visiting me in the hospital, bringing me a meal, never underestimate someone bringing you dinner when you're in the hospital for 3 months. It's nice to get something besides hospital food. You know, it's just the phone calls and meals being dropped off and everything just to make your life just a little bit easier is all very appreciated. And without that support, I really don't know what would have happened because I had it. So I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that do not have that kind of support, but I really did have a community of people that really rallied behind me. And I did not take that for granted. And I really appreciated everything that people have done and continue to do for me.
Awesome. Greg, how about you?
I would say my family, certainly my wife, Vicki, my daughters, Megan and Jessica, my mom, my brother, my sisters, you know, they're the core group. They're the ones who really gave me the emotional support that is necessary, you know, because there are a lot of unknowns. But certainly the folks at Penn Transplant Institute were just tremendous, and they continue to be. They answered all of my questions and my family's questions. Certainly had, there's quite a rigorous process that goes through in the months that precede transplant. You have to go in for testing. You have to go in for a number of different evaluations, and it's and one of those evaluations involves having the family there, so that everyone is informed of what is going to be happening with the process of eventually reaching transplant stage and what will happen afterwards. There was also a very important group gathering that we had in the days before I was discharged from HUP, and so we had a plan going forward, you know, for my care after I would leave the hospital, which was several weeks down the road. So that certainly, all those aspects were certainly helpful, continue to be very helpful. I would be remiss if I didn't also include my pastor and the support from great folks at my church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. I was thinking as both of you were talking, you know, you touched on the emotional support, the physical support that you received, and I was thinking for me, the spiritual support was also crucial. You know, so certainly, you know, I had my wife with me by my side. I called her my external hard drive or memory card, because as I'm going through these appointments, and again, you know, when you're waiting for a heart transplant, that means you're not getting a lot of blood to your brain and things like that. And so remembering things was very difficult for me. It still kind of is, but at the time especially. So you know, she would be the one to take the notes, and she would learn all that she could. She would ask the questions. There was all of that. There was, you know, which, you know, at times it was, you know, you would see people, or you would talk to people and they would say, oh, have you heard anything? You know, at first it's like, no, it's just, we'll get there when we get there. But eventually, you know, it kind of got to the point where I started to get a little sarcastic, and I would say, you know, if I had heard something, you wouldn't be talking to me, I'd be on my way there. So, but anyway, the support that I received from just, you know, with the Help Hope Live campaign actually helped immensely. And, you know, just, you just put it out on your Facebook page, and, you know, people are like, hey, you know, let me contribute to that. And that was such a big help to take that worry of the financial stuff out of play, that, you know, that we knew we were going to be able to handle what wasn't covered by our insurance. So that was good. And, you know, Greg, you brought up your pastor, and, you know, just the prayers, the prayer networks that people, you know, people I don't even know, still to this day don't know, I know were and are praying for me every day as I waited. So
Yep, and that remains for me as well.
Yeah, so it's just it's very amazing, humbling, to have so much support, and frankly, I know there are not, you know, I know there are transplant patients out there who don't have the kind of support that I have had, and it really it hurts my donated heart to think of, you know, people going through this without that kind of support, because it was absolutely necessary. Okay, anything else either of you want to?
No, I don't think so.
All right. I kind of skipped this one already, so I'll go back to it. And I think some of it we talked, just in terms of preparing for and then recovering from your transplant, what are some of the highs and lows that you had, both while you were waiting for transplant and then maybe after your transplant? And Greg, I'll start with you, since you are the most recent recipient among us.
Well, certainly when I was admitted in the 3 weeks prior, I was a hurting puppy, and it was really touch and go at that point. And so I had to make sure that you know, I was following everything that doctors and nurses at HUP were telling me to do, and I certainly was. I mean, I was on 4 catheters prior to transplant, so you know, I certainly wasn't going anywhere. So it was important to you know, to listen to their instructions and to stay positive. You know, that's the one thing I think it was really important, was having a positive attitude prior to and during and going through the process of transplant, and afterwards as well, because having that positivity really does, it keeps you strong, it keeps you going. You have to block out the negativity, and you have to just keep on keeping on. You know, there's going to be some setbacks. There were for me. I had a upper GI infection in August of 2020 that was knocked me for a loop. I had to be readmitted to HUP twice to have that treated. You know, these are the kind of things that do come up, and it's almost like, well, you have to, and the experience that I gained from it was, well, you have to expect it, you know, that things like this as a result of the transplant could and sometimes do come up. You know, it's not always peaches and cream. And so, you know, I had to have several hospitalizations in order to deal with that, and basically was able to get my my numbers back to a very strong level by the middle of October, and I still had some treatment for it. I had a injection, putting in some saline, and also in medication, a pump that I would use every day. And that lasted, I believe, until December, and then I was taken off that. And ever since, I've not had a problem with any GI symptoms. So that's just one of the things you have to do. As far as maintaining my health, certainly the walking that I do, the exercise that I do, especially with the cardio rehab program I currently have at LGH, and it's also eating sensibly. My wife certainly takes care of that. You know, I get good, sensible, and wholesome meals, and on occasion I might snack a little bit more, but I do cut out alcohol. I don't really have that anymore, maybe except for a glass of wine at holidays, but that's it. Knock off the sodas because of all the sugar content, and just basically it's water, it's unsweetened iced tea, and low sugar drinks like lemonade and fruit punch. That's basically all I have anymore. So it's those kind of things that that I do to help take care of myself every day.
Did you say me, Pat?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. So before I got sick, as I said earlier, I got sick very quickly. I went from being healthy to being not sick quickly. And prior to getting sick, I was one of those people who was at the gym 5 o'clock in the morning. I ate a very healthy diet. I eat low carb, so I wasn't eating sweets or anything like that. If, you know, I was a lot of meat, a lot of vegetables. And then I got sick, and then I had the LVAD. And as soon as I was strong enough on the LVAD, so the LVAD went in March, and I would say by July of 2015, I started back on the, I was walking, and then by July, I started back on the elliptical. And I was able to get myself back up to 5 miles a day on the elliptical. And I was able to do that and keep myself as healthy as I could going into transplant. On the LVAD, you're on a fluid restriction, you're on a sodium restriction. So that was a little challenging for me because I was also still at that time full-time teaching, and talking for, you know, close to eight hours a day, you know, does require a little bit more hydration than, you know, than 6 cups of water or whatever your drink of choice is. But I learned to love seltzer at the time because I wasn't gulping that down. But going into transplant, so that's how I went into transplant, had the transplant, was in the hospital for roughly a month. After left the hospital, they switched my tacrolimus when I got out of the hospital, and that put me in a pretty bad rejection. So I was home for about 5 days, and I was bounced back in the hospital for another 5 on really high steroids, and recovered from that. And had my transplant recovery has not been as easy as my LVAD recovery. I did the cardiac rehab. I continued into the phase 3 of cardiac rehab, and I did that for a couple of months. I attempted to return to teaching, and that was unsuccessful. So now I was at the gym and I was doing yoga. COVID kind of changed all of that. So I do yoga at home. I did buy a stationary bike, not a Peloton, not wealthy enough for that, but I did buy a stationary bike. I was walking outside, but the transplant doctors would prefer that you walk on a treadmill, just to kind of keep your momentum going, if you will. And I can no longer eat low carb because I developed, I have had a number of post-transplant complications, and something called gastroparesis is one of them. And I have a lot of difficulty digesting meat. So I really can't eat meat anymore. And the gastroparesis is just because when they remove the heart, they sever your vagus nerve. So it's something that the vagus nerve, my stomach muscles are paralyzed, they don't work as well. So with gastroparesis, my food, I have a slow digestion process. So the food just sits in my stomach, and I can't eat raw vegetables, and the food I used to like to eat, I can't eat anymore. So, so I had to do a lot of changing. And that was very different for me because it seems like the easiest thing for me to digest are carbs. And that is something that is very foreign to me to even buy and to put in my diet. But, I keep learning. So I know what I can eat and I know what I can't eat. So, my diet's pretty plain. I know I can eat fennel, and I make fennel about 5 nights a week because I do like it. And I'm going to try Brussels sprouts again. They were one of my favorites, but they also, anything in the cabbage family is really not good for someone with gastroparesis, or broccoli or cauliflower or anything in that family. So, but just trying to maintain that healthy lifestyle is definitely key after you go through this process. And we go through a lot. I think Pat and Greg would agree, like just the evaluation process and everything you go through to get on the other side, to get where we are today. You want to take care of the new organ that you receive, because you want to get the most out of it. You want to get for lack of a better word, you want to get the most mileage out of it. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to take the best care of it that you can.
We've received the greatest gift of all, and that is the gift of life. And it is up to each one of us to make sure that we are doing our part to ensure that we're taking care of this donor organ that we have inside of us. I mean, you have a transplant, it definitely alters your perspective on things. And so I just wanted to add that in on our discussion.
And I would say for me, prior to transplant, I had from the time I was listed, 2 days later after I was listed, I got an LVAD. And without the LVAD, I definitely would not have made it to transplant. I would not have made it the 3 years that I had to wait. But about a year before I was listed, my cardiologist said, you really need to get serious about a low sodium diet, because I was collecting fluid like you wouldn't believe. And so really about a year before I was listed, I started low sodium diet. Again, my wife was instrumental in making that happen, and she bought a couple of low sodium cookbooks, and I got my sodium intake down to some days 500-600 milligrams of sodium per day, whereas the normal recommended amount is, like, I think for a normal person, I think it's 2,300. So I had it down to almost a quarter or a fifth of that. So that helped me to lose weight, helped me to kind of get in that mode of taking care of myself, because as soon as I was listed, they said, you really have to do whatever you can to stay as healthy as you can, because the sicker you are going into transplant, the less likely you are to have a successful outcome. So that was That was key for me. And so, you know, despite the fact that I felt awful often, you know, my wife said, let's go for a walk. You know, we'll go around the block. You know, if you're up for it, we'll go a mile. We'll stop as much as you need. And, you know, eventually I started, you know, she started doing a bunch of like 5K races. And so I said, well, you know what? I actually was sort of inspired by another transplant patient who also had an LVAD, who completed a 5K. And I was like, you know, if that guy can do it, I can do it. So the next chance I got, I did a 5K, and it took me about to finish. And that was about 1.5 years before my transplant. A year later, I did the same race, and you know, I could tell how much I was deteriorating even from a year ago, because it took me almost 2 hours to finish. It took me so long actually that the finish line was torn down, and the company that put on the race was long gone before I came back. So, but doing that helped to keep me as possible for when the time came. And as a result, I did have a pretty easy recovery. You know, Linda, it was interesting to hear you say that you recovered much easier from the LVAD surgery than the transplant, because I was the exact opposite. I was in the hospital for a month after my LVAD surgery. I days, like I had the surgery on a Thursday and I woke up on a Sunday. So yeah, it was very different for me. Whereas, you know, a week after my transplant, I walked a mile, and 2 days after that, I walked it all at the same time. So the first time I did it, you know, in you know, a couple of laps at a time around the nurse's station. And I left the hospital after 12 days after my transplant. So since then, you know, I feel better, and, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I don't have to be so strict about things. And I have to keep reminding myself, you know, I can't just go back into old habits. You know, that responsibility, like you said, Greg, to take care of this precious gift that's been given to me. And so I continue to fight to do that. Continue to walk, continue to do races, continue, you know, I actually run them. I'm still slow, but I still do them. And, you know, walk usually at least a mile outside every day.
Well, you, Jarrah, myself, we all have our motivations for, you know, why we want to extend our lives. And having gone through the transplant, it certainly was it elevated and reinforced, you know, my reasons, you know, to get this done. And mine were obviously so I could still be with my wife and be with my family. But especially in the case of my daughters, well, I wanted to walk my older daughter down the aisle. I'll have a chance to do that on June the 18th. So that was certainly reason enough at the start. And also my younger daughter will be graduating from college in May of next year. So those were two motivating factors that I certainly took to heart, literally, when I was beginning the process, and said, I want to be there for them. I want to be there for my family. I want to be there for you know, my mom and my siblings. You know, I just you know, I didn't want to leave the scene early, and lo and behold, here I am, and I'm still going strong, and want to get stronger as we move on with my therapy and the rehab that I'm doing right now.
Okay. Next topic that I was going to bring up was dealing with our donors and our donor families. It's really difficult not to think about your donor. You know, for me, from the time I was listed, I immediately started praying for whoever it was that was out there walking around having no idea that they were going to be my heart donor. But I started praying then, and continued, and every time, you know, when I mentioned before about the network of friends and family and everybody who was supporting me, and they, you know, I pray for you every day. You know, I'm praying for you always. And I said, please also pray for my donor, you know, my future donor and their family, whoever they may be, wherever they may be. And so, you know, that was very important to me, to honor that from the beginning, and obviously continued on. You know, the night that I got the call for the transplant, as soon as I got off the phone with the transplant coordinator, first thing that my wife Amy and I did was pray for my donor and my donor's family, because we knew that at that moment they were going through the worst day of their lives. And, you know, it was going to be a great joy for me and my family, and my friends and my supporters, but it just wasn't that way for them. So that, you know, for me, that was important.
Well,
and I guess okay, Greg, you want to jump in?
Well, through the Gift of Life program, I was able to get in touch with the donor's family. I waited 9 months because I expected they were going through the stages of grief, and I did not want to do it immediately after I had the transplant. That was inappropriate. So I waited until early December to write my letter to the donor, and a month later I received a very kind reply back from the donor's family. Gave me a little bit of information about the donor, and it was very touching and quite emotional to receive that. And I certainly think about him and his family pretty much every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I was a little more anxious than you were. And I wrote my letter and sent it about a month after my transplant. You know, knowing the stages that it has to go through, you know, I send it and my team has to read it, and the OPO has to read it, and then it has to get sent to the OPO wherever the heart came from, and they have to read it and check and make sure everything. And then the family can decide if they want to receive it or not. So that was kind of my thinking. And I did end up hearing back from them about 3 months later, around Christmas time, a little bit before Christmas. I heard back from them, and like you said, it was just so moving to get this note and to find out, you know, who this hero was that saved my life. So, Lynn, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, I did contact, like you, Pat, I contacted my donor family about 3 months after my transplant. I have never heard back from my transplant, from my donor family. I have reached out a couple of times, but my 3 months, because of September, my 3 months were right around the holidays. So I don't know if that made it a little bit more difficult or not. After that, I started reaching out on my anniversary date. I don't know if that made any more sense, because it would also be their anniversary date. But, you know, sometimes, you know, other times life, when I get busy, you know, like on a day like today, I don't necessarily think about sitting down and writing to my donor family, because it takes a lot to write to the family of someone who saved your life. And but then you know, at one point, because I've written so many times, I just get to the point where I write like the heart, you know, this is what I'm doing to maintain the heart. Like these are the things that I've done. You know, because I have a responsibility to my donor and to my donor's family, and the heart is still in good condition. And, you know, I'll be hitting 5 years in September. And these are the things that I've done over these like I have 5 more years of being alive, thanks to your relative. And these are the things that I've been able to do, you know, and Yeah. I try to share the highlights of my life, but, you know, I don't know, do they see that as a way of someone else missed the highlights of their life? I don't know. They're tricky letters to write. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with. I know, the fact that I wrote mine about a month after my transplant. I went through several revisions. I probably started writing it, 2 weeks before I actually gave it to them, and kept going back and changing things. Because you want to get it just right. You don't want to say anything that's going to be hurtful to them. But like you said, in subsequent communications that I've had, I do try to, highlight what I'm doing. One of the things I do with social media a lot is, every time I, post something about, hey, I did this 5K, or hey, we went to this, park and just saw all this beauty. I finish my post with the hashtag thanks Bob. Bob is my donor's name. And, I just feel like that's just a small way that I can kind of honor or the gift that I have. I guess I'm coming up on 4 years in August this year. So, that's time that I wouldn't have. And one other thing popped into my mind, back when I was waiting, I had mentioned before about, make sure you pray for my donor. But that was another thing is, when people are saying, do you have any sense of when you might get your heart? And I said, well, and it did seem like a lot of, especially my dad and maybe some of my other, closer relatives were more anxious than I was. And I kept telling them, every day that I wait is another day that my donor has with his family. So that's kind of the mindset that I kept about things. So anyway, anything else either of you want to add on that topic?
No.
Okay. Kate, I see you just popped on, or are we wrapping up?
Yes. This conversation has been so great. I think everyone has learned so much from you guys, but we do want to get to a couple questions that some people have asked. So first question that we received is, how did you manage the cost of medication? Did fundraising assist with that? And also, how did you manage the post-transplant care and all the follow-up appointments that come with that? So kind of a two-part question.
Certainly when it came to, obviously with the Help Hope Live program, it certainly helped with the incidental expenses, including prescriptions, for covering above what was covered by my medical plan. And what was the second part again to the question, Kate?
How did you manage the post-transplant care and all the follow-up that goes along with that?
Well, you just do what has to be done. I mean, I went through 14 biopsies in the first year following transplant, and many other appointments, a number of different areas, neurology, and also in having x-rays, MRIs, and those kind of procedures. It's just simply a part of the plan, and also to be on top of the medications that I was taking. Certainly there's been a big shift from the meds I was taking at the beginning once I received my donor heart to where I am now. I'm taking far fewer, but they are it's a good blend, and that's what the doctors continually try to do, is to come up with a very good blend. But certainly going back to Help Hope Live, I mean, that was just, it was helping to defray those expenses. Certainly, for TAC, it was for CellSup, which was the other immunosuppressant drug I was taking early on. They could get a little pricey, and certainly the donations received through the fundraising through Help Hope Live certainly helped defray that.
Awesome. How about you, Linda?
That was a great question to the person who asked that. So my employer insurance at the time helped cover it. Currently I'm on Medicare, but my copays were still high. So every time, even on the LVAD, every time I had a right heart cath, my copay for that would be $150. So when you're right after a heart transplant, when you're in the hospital, you're getting the cath every week. And then when you're out of the hospital, it's every other week. And then, they start to pare them down. And then when I was out of the hospital, the person in admissions recommended I go to financial services at the hospital. And the financial services set me up with medical assistance. And that was such a great thing, because even though I was able to submit those $150 copays to Help Hope Live, it was still really great that I had medical assistance to fall back on, because medical assistance then covered that $150, but I still had prescriptions and I still had other expenses that had to be paid for. And it was really great. And now, even though I'm not, even though now I can't work, I can't teach anymore, when it comes to medical assistance, I'm now with medical assistance for workers with disabilities. It's called MAUD. And I told them, I said, well, my doctors don't really want me to work. And it was really interesting the way this worked. And this, I'm explaining this because it could help somebody. They kind of said, go and if you could help a neighbor, if you can watch a neighbor's dog or take your neighbor's dog for a walk, and we want you to make the least possible money you can. And we want it to be in cash, and we want it to be no more than $10 a week, because your payments, your MAUD payments, are based on what you're making a month. So I was able to do that. And so right now I have Medicare, but then I also I keep that MAUD as my secondary insurance. And even though I'm paying, I just got a letter, it's going down to $92 a month, but it's still really great, because when I think with Medicare, if they, 20% of what they don't cover is still more than $92 a month. So, that's really great. And then, I usually wait every 3 months, and then I send in my stuff to Help Hope Live. And I call Hope Live like my bank. Send everything in my bank. Then I wait for my, I have one credit card. I use one credit card, and that's just my medical stuff. So
I'm glad we're here for you.
Yes, yes, me too. And I appreciate it.
Pat, how about you?
Yeah, in terms of the like the costs and things like that, something popped into my mind that hasn't really been brought up yet. But from the time you start your campaign, and you campaign, basically as soon as you were listed, it will, you can use your Help Hope Live campaign to pay for things prior to your transplant. So, which is great for, those of us who wait a while for the transplant and incur a lot of expenses. One of actually less than a month before my transplant, I had a stroke that was caused by the LVAD that I had. And the insurance decided they were not going to pay for it. And so we got this bill from this medical helicopter company for almost $50,000. And fortunately, we were able to negotiate that down after we, basically fought the entire, the insurance company for, well past my transplant, like a year and a half past my transplant. And so we were able to negotiate it down, but it was still a huge amount that we ended up having to pay. And that was all covered by Help Hope Live. So that was number one. In terms of the follow-up, like what what constitutes follow. I think Linda and Greg mentioned, your appointments are scheduled very close together the earlier you are in the transplant. So fortunately, I have gotten to the point of being where I only have to go to Cleveland Clinic, which is about 3.5 hours from where I live. I only have to go there twice a year now, assuming everything goes okay. And thus far, I haven't had any, outstanding issues that have required me to go back more often than that. So that's exciting. Also exciting that maybe this may be the year that I don't hit my out-of-pocket max, because that hasn't happened in probably pretty close to a decade now. So, it just again highlights how important it is to have some live to be able to do that. Because when you're talking not if, but when you hit your out-of-pocket max every year, it's critical to have that help. Especially when Linda, like you said, you can't go back to teaching. So, what do you do in that instance? So your money's already tight. So it's great to have that to help.
Yes.
Definitely. Another question that was asked is, how long were you on the waiting list waiting for your transplant? Greg, if you want to start.
I was on the waiting list, I would like to say about roughly 2 months before I actually had the transplant. And so, it was after I completed all my evaluations, had all the testing done. At that point, I was on the waiting list. And as things progressed and my condition worsened, then I was moved up more. When I went from being a category 4 to a category 2 at the time that I was admitted at HUP. And so it did accelerate that process, certainly. So that's what happened with me. That was my time frame.
How about you, Linda?
I waited 18 months. I'm O positive, so I knew I was going to be waiting a little bit longer than somebody without such a popular blood type would be waiting. And I did, like I mentioned in the beginning, I did have 2 false alarms prior, and one of them was about maybe 4 weeks after the LVAD went in. And then another one was on Cinco de Mayo. And then the other one was in September. So, but it was interesting for me that I was waiting every holiday. I was waiting every weekend. I'm like, well, maybe I have to, not waiting, but you're more ready to get that phone call in the middle of the night, because that's how they prepare you. But I never got a call on the weekend. I never got a call on a holiday, never got a call in the middle of the night. They were all, the day I got the call, it was, I just got finished teaching. Call came in at 3, got to the hospital by 4 something, was up in, they had me registered. I was up in the ICU by 5 and rolled into the ER by 6:45. So different from my first 2 calls where I was waiting there with, for 12 hours before they came back and said, the heart wasn't viable. So, and one of those calls was a high risk heart. For anybody that has high risk, you do find out the high risk was a cocaine overdose. So you do find out about information if you are going to accept a high risk heart. So.
And Linda, one question that someone asked was how long you had the LVAD for. I think you mentioned it, but.
Yes, 18 months.
18 months. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So, I was listed February 27th of 2015. The LVAD went in March 3rd of 2015. So kind of wait and time on the LVAD is pretty much the same for me.
Got it.
In my situation, unlike you, Linda and Pat, I did not have the LVAD. It was considered for a time, but it wasn't the bridge that I had. I went straight from, basically went straight from home to being admitted on February the 5th of 2020. And then several weeks later, got the call, and that's when I received my daughter heart.
How about you, Pat?
I waited almost 3 years. I said 68 days because who's counting, but actually that exact number of days that I waited. And I also had an LVAD, which was put in almost immediately. I was listed on September 9th of 2004. And I was told at that time that if I did not get a heart in the next 2 days, that they were going to put an LVAD in, and they did. So that started the longer wait, which was, I guess, another 1,066 days.
That's a long time.
Long time with an LVAD.
But you get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, every one of those days was another day that my donor had with his family.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we are coming up on an hour, so we're gonna end the conversation for today, but any questions that we didn't get to, we will definitely answer in a blog, and that will contain more information and hopefully some information from Katrina. So just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you to Pat, Linda, and Greg. We appreciate all your insight so much, and keep a lookout for our next Hope Talk, which will be coming soon. So thank you all. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.